could you please remind us how gap ups and gap downs work from a technical analysis perspective? Yes, they always get filled. Well, most of the time. So what happens if, like, Nvidia is a good one. Here we go. So remember that post I put out the other day where it, the market closed and then it had gapped up to, that was where it had gapped up to. In fact, let's have a look. It'll be on here. If I just type in Nvidia. Here we go. That was the picture. So it closed at 9.4 something. 9.49, and then it looked like it was opening up at just over 1,000. Well, what actually happened is it opened, 1,020, and it's just been storming ahead ever since. And it's, they had a great earnings, but also, does everyone hear what Elon Musk just announced? Anyone familiar with what he's announced? So he's raising the biggest Series B fundraise in human history of $6 billion. That's the biggest Series B that's ever happened. It hasn't completed it, but he's doing it. And XAI, he's hoping to buy 100,000 HPUs, which it's going to be like probably the biggest AI computer on the planet. Now, who's selling these HPUs? Oh, Nvidia. Literally, Nvidia is just handing out all these buckets and spades to this massive new gold rush. It's monumental. So this is a prime example, or this is a rare example where a gap up has not been filled at least 50%. And Nvidia tends to just ignore gap ups. But historically, if you look at the S&P 500, come on S&P. So here's the stat with the S&P 500. Every gap down in US history has been filled completely. And that makes sense because if anything gaps down, it will always be filled because the market is at all-time highs. So that's a silly stat, but it sort of makes sense. However, not every gap up has been filled. So typically when you see so let's just draw this out. I guess some of the people here may not even know what a gap up or a down is. Sorry, and I've just assumed previous knowledge. One sec. So you have a chart, market does this, and then all of a sudden it opens the next day down here. So that's called a gap down. And it normally happens in stocks because it can't happen with crypto because it's 24/7. You can see it in FX because it's not 24/7, but it's 27.5.5. So it's open 24 hours a day, 5.5 days a week. But when you have this gap down, you have a very high probability, like very high. It's like normally more than 90%. That 50% of the gap down will be filled. So back in the old days, this used to be one of my trading strategies. I would hunt for gap ups and gap downs, not in the big markets, like the S&P 500, but the smaller markets. So I when I was dicking around with penny stocks, oh Jesus Christ, this is like 20 years ago, 15, 20 years ago, I was dicking around with penny stocks and much smaller UK listed companies. Because there's less volatility, this used to work beautifully. There was more volatility, and it was a really good positive expectancy trading strategy. So that's that. So a 50% pullback is highly likely, and then a full filling. So when I say it gets filled, is also high probability, but not as good as the 50%. So I used to basically do my stop losses relatively tight. I'd end up getting something like a 5R here at the 50% level. I then take half of the profits off, then let the rest of the profits run for the full fill, if that makes sense.
Is there a time frame for that as well, Si? Or could it be any time?
It really needs to be in the daily time frame. You can do it. No, you can't really do it on the 5 minute or anything like that. I just did it on the daily. So if I think that, in fact, let's look at the stock FTSE.
Because what I was looking at is MicroStrategy.
Okay, let's have a look at MSTR. Where is MSTR? MS.
We did a massive gap up, like end of Feb.
Oh, here we go. Yeah, it
$100,
hasn't.
and it's just never hit that again. So that's kind of what I was looking at.
Yeah, so I think with any of these crazy stocks, like anything like Tesla, MicroStrategy, or Nvidia, I wouldn't rely the trading. I would not try and do gap ups. But if you ever see a gap down, you need to, yeah, like here we go. Here's a gap down. Guess what? It got fully filled. It's unlikely you'll see many gap downs with some of these. There's another gap down. It got filled. Gap down. Got filled. Gap down. It got filled very quickly, and then it got properly filled over here. Here we go. Here's a great example. So MicroStrategy closed here. It reopened there, and we don't know the direction and what happened on that day, but we had a low down here and a high up here. Now, obviously, you'd have to go in the lower time frames to see what actually happened during that candle. But look at that wick. You can see it fully filled the gap down, and then probably end up pissing it down here. Let's go back on the daily chart to see. Here's a gap down. Yeah, so with stocks, you see gap downs all the freaking time. Gap down, they always get filled. Now here's a gap down that took best part of half a year to get filled. It only got filled around here. So yeah, they're like with anything, some of the gap downs you may be waiting a while, but I would say it's like north of a 95% probability. It definitely has positive expectancy. And the reason I don't do gap up or downs anymore is because I don't trade stocks. I'm with crypto. But for those of you who do play with stocks, yeah, I would, especially as we're about to enter a period of QE or whatever they want to call it, NERP, ZERP, whatever. Then yeah, I would ignore gap ups because they could just piss off forever. But any gap downs, you need to capitalize on it. So, and I guess you could probably see this in, yeah, if you look at the ETFs. So here's the BlackRock one. There's a lot of gap ups and gap downs. There's just not much volatility here, as you can see. But any gap down, I promise you will get filled, because IBIT here is linked to Bitcoin, and if I'm so confident Bitcoin's going to go up over time, therefore any gap down you see on this ETF will get filled. Now I'm always aware that I should never use words like will, definitely, 100%, but yeah, gap downs on these ETFs are extremely likely to get filled.